Here's my perspective on changing habits. So, what even are habits? Habits are patterns of behavior that have been ongoing for long enough that they're not being questioned. They're just no longer being questioned at this point. I've often heard them be described as behavioral patterns that people don't think about, but I find that definition to be lacking since there's literally always a choice of whether or not you think about a habit. As far as I can tell, the only uniquely defining factors of a habit are as follows, and as such, my methods of handling habits aim to directly address them. Habits are hard to break because they're usually beneath your level of awareness. You're not aware of them. Number two, habits are patterns of behavior and processes of action. And number three, habits are morally neutral. They can be good or bad. As I said, they often lie beneath the level of conscious awareness. So the first step in changing them usually involves bringing the patterns and processes out from the darkness and into the light. In the light, baseline observation skills are the most relevant since they engage the process of harvesting raw information from a situation. Once that knowledge is gained, it must be integrated into your mind system, creating insight that you can apply in your daily life. This process involves self reflection and simulation of like different lives for yourself or like the changes in your life based on the new info. Logic and imagination meet in this step since you have to imagine your life but with the new knowledge to gain the insight that you're looking for. And comparing and contrasting your reality with alternate versions will cement the logic into your mind so that once you extend your imagination to others, you don't have to keep doing the math to give them the wisdom. Once you've got the math and the logic locked in, using your imagination to simulate how other people's lives will be different should feel like a simple mix and match. It should feel like checking different applications of your insight against their strengths, weaknesses, and archetypes, rather than just going through the problem solving process for their problem yourself. Once you've successfully conveyed your wisdom to another person, it'll turn right back into information for them, and they'll have to interact with it in their mind in the form of new knowledge. This cycle applies to pretty much all informational transfers between minds, and once you get familiar with it, you'll be able to transfer ideas to people way more efficiently. As an example, me like doing this right now is me turning my insight into wisdom and giving it to you, while giving I give you the wisdom, and it's new knowledge. You get new knowledge when I give you the wisdom. You don't get wisdom when I speak, though. That's the important part. You don't get wisdom when I speak. You don't get wisdom when other people speak. You get wisdom when you take the knowledge and integrate it into your system. Then you get insight, and then you can spread that as wisdom. You see what I'm saying? So, um, this is the first time I've really had to be this in depth about this kind of cycle because the way I'm trying to communicate it requires more detailed elaboration. Usually, I just have enough elaboration for the person I'm talking to understand. Um, so, gathering information is somewhat self-explanatory in my opinion, but it's still important for me to go through the full process in detail. You never know when people don't have their bases covered. So, the main component to gathering knowledge is collecting answers to these fundamental questions: how, who, what, when, where, and why. And a quick aside, I feel like there is a like empty spot for like a combination of why and how. I feel like we should have a question for it, the combination of why and how. Um, but like honestly, that's probably its own essay. So not all of these questions have the same purpose. Who, when, and where, who, when, and where are questions that focus on the context of what you're investigating, while what, how, and why are questions that focus on the details and the mechanics of what you're investigating. It's the big view and the small view, or wide view, maybe, wide view and focused view. It's important to know that the questions don't apply equally to every situation or to every investigation. Obviously, you can have different amounts of information ahead of time for each question, but like due to their different like scales and scopes, they have different amounts of relevance based on the purpose of your investigation. If you're looking to understand the truth of what is real, your investigation will be mostly context focused with critical details. Usually, But if you want to find out what to do about a situation, it'll be focused mostly on details with a few contextual through lines. Again, usually. You'll have a natural affinity for one side of this relationship over the other. You'll gain that information more actively and the other side more passively, probably. Um, it could be reversed. It's a polarity thing. You can kind of like there's a lot of like flippy dippy combinations. So just know you have a unique signature, right? And it's not necessarily that one side will be easier than the other, but it will be more automatic than the other one. One side will be active, one side will be more passive. Now, once you have all these pieces of information collected, you can focus on where you started in your investigation and on where you're trying to go. You can jump the gap or like build a bridge. And both of these experiences can occur quickly or slowly, which leaves us with roughly four main combinations and some in between stuff that you'll be able to navigate as you encounter. When you jump the gap slowly, it'll feel like keeping like holding the most relevant info in mind for a while, and then suddenly you reach clarity. Uh, but if you do it quickly, it's like that holding happens in the background, and you just jump one like at some point and reach clarity. Um, when you build a bridge, it feels like connecting the dots between multiple pieces of information to build out a bigger understanding. It comes gradually, or at least more gradually, and it's easy to feel yourself getting pulled around by this experience, whether it comes quickly or not. Once again, though, when it comes quickly, it just removes the stewing from your awareness, which pretty much blocks the feeling. You have to perceive it in order to feel it. Typically, the main difference between whether you get the fast or slow versions comes down to how much dedicated empty space there was for it in your mind when you were gathering the information in the first place. Um, as this connection is something that happens during rest periods and in empty space, you can combine the integration process with the info gathering process. It's important to keep in mind that the process of turning knowledge into wisdom, or excuse me, knowledge into insight, uh, may just be the most personalized part of this process and will have a unique experience just for you that is analogous to these concepts. So you might not jump the bridge or build you might not jump the gap or build the bridge. um, it kind of like you'll have your own experience that corresponds to a sudden big change and a gradual change, right? um, and understanding that experience requires looking into yourself and understanding what you see as a cohesive unit rather than an assortment of data, which is a whole other, like, that's beyond the scope of this video. It's truly a whole different fundamental skill, and that's like, I don't know, you probably should have learned that in Selfhood 101, but hey, if you need me to teach Selfhood 101, honestly, maybe go watch Justin Scott while I work on that. But next up, we're going to talk about that empty space, because I feel like this is something, this is class 102, so we're talking about the empty space. So under like average conditions, usually I allocate a lot of empty space for new ideas, and there's a particular way that I do this. Like, where I can, and I'm not always the most successful with this, but where I can, I avoid having expectations for what reality is going to look like. But I will make predictions based on what information is being presented to me. This helps me keep from filling my head with nautical nonsense. And like I said, that's not always successful. So if my head isn't over encumbered with what ifs, what the hell is it filled with? Turns out it's filled with creativity, novelty, and nothing. Each component of this recipe, and more accurately, each combination, each pair of components, serves two functions. Creativity and novelty allow the parts of my brain and any other part of my body that may or may not be doing thinking, those parts that are dedicated to processing the target, it allows them to rest. Creativity and novelty allow them to rest. And it also allows them to, creativity and novelty. Oh man, I'm getting ahead of myself. Creativity and novelty allow those parts to harness the power of newness and seek it out. Seek it out through creative methods. Novelty and nothing. That newness combined with that emptiness, that is what allows for the rest. So that can come in the form of think about when you rotate muscle groups at the gym. If you do that, you can do a bunch of bicep curls, and now your arms are tired, and then you can do squats, and it's totally fine for you to do squats, and as long as you're not using your arms, because your arms are tired. It's not your legs that are tired, it's your arms, right? It's a new thing going on and a nothing going on. Do you see what I'm saying? Same thing happens in your mind, right? So that's that. And creativity and nothing combined create a vacuum that pulls information in that you need to put together. It's important to understand that it's important to understand if you're a physics head. Maybe it's not so important if you're not a physics person, but concepts like information has to obey the laws of physics also. Do not forget, every thought you have is electromagnetic in here. All of the data we store is electromagnetic in there. We transfer information. The fact that you're watching this over the internet, information is being transferred through wires that are probably underground, or however they do it, to your location. And then it's being broadcast with what? Electromagnetic radiation, but of a lower vibration. Okay? Information has to obey the laws of physics. That's the point. And we utilize this every single time our mind wanders. If you'll notice, next time your mind wanders, you don't have to necessarily interrupt the wandering, but notice when you're done that there was an empty spot before your mind started wandering. There was liminal space in your mind before it started filling with nautical nonsense. So, what does it feel like though, right? For me, it's important for me to understand what things feel like, especially when it comes to internal things like mind stuff, spirit stuff. It's energetic work. It's very important for me to understand what it feels like. What am I supposed to be experiencing, right? That's how I know I understand something. So what is it? How do we describe this feeling, right? Imagine a drain at the bottom of a body of water. Could be a pool, could be a bath, could be a lake, could be the ocean, could be a whole planet. Maybe not a whole planet. Imagine a drain, right? That's you. You are the drain. The water represents information and potential concepts. Now, what people normally do when they hear me give instructions is they try to be a plunger or a pump. They want to get active. They want to do stuff. This is not time for you to do stuff, okay? When it comes time to use the power of nothing, your goal is to become the thing that the water falls through, the thing that the water maybe falls into. It's kind of like cousins, right? But the water moves itself. Gravity, magnetism, it will move the water for you. You don't have to move the water. You don't have to pump the water. And quite frankly, if you try to do that, you're just going to disturb the flow, and that's going to slow it down. You see what I'm saying? Think about when you see that whirlpool in a drain. You disturb the whirlpool, the water is flowing slower. Air can't get out of the place that the water is going. That means the water can't get in. You see what I'm saying? You're just going to slow down the flow, and you don't want to do that, right? All you have to do is create and hold the space for the information to land. When you can hold a secure perimeter ready for something to arrive and let these things flow through you, seemingly random things will pass by your awareness, including information, emotions, and observations. Your goal here is just to observe them and let them pass as you maintain focus on keeping the perimeter safe and secure. So what you're doing is maintaining your focus on the safe area, right? What is happening in life may not be that. You might be crashing out. You might be crying your eyes out. You might be laughing. You might be pondering, right? It doesn't matter because you have a target. You have a thing in mind that you're trying to pull in. You need to stay focused on that. And whatever shit is going on, whatever is going on in your system, you like just let it happen. It will it's not. I'm not saying to stop things from happening. I'm saying let them happen and maintain your presence holding the perimeter. If you've ever played Destiny, the shooter game, you need to be a bubble titan. You need to hold that. Just hold the bubble. Hold the defensive barrier, right? Hold the safe space. That the health of the shield depends on you. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to hold that up, right? If you're busy trying to like give your people a safe space, give your target a safe space to land, but you're busy trying to push forward, you're gonna get mauled and the bubble's gonna go down and then everybody's gonna be screwed. You can't do that. See what I'm saying? A couple other things that are analogous to this process that I thought of: gardening, echolocation, being a black hole, and active listening during a conversation. I'm not elaborating on those, it takes too long. Now, once you understand holding a vacuum of nothing in your mind, you counterbalance it with a combination of creativity and novelty. In my opinion, the best way to do this is to incorporate some kind of play into the process. But as long as you have a safe and open space in your mind, any combination of creativity and novelty will do the job to work with nothing and drive that engine of change. When you're working to move through a process of change, though, expect to encounter positive and negative feedback in both the informational and emotional realms. Quick aside, and also the physical realm. You will have to learn from the things that pass in front of your awareness and let them go for enough newness to come through and change the actual outcome of the process. Now that process of information is laid out, it's time to zoom out. Zoom out! And ask the question, how about we get here? How do we get here? What's going on? We're kind of deep in the everything right now. What's going on? We started with a pattern so consistent that you accepted it as normal and stopped having reason to question your perception once the feeling rolls in. After perceiving the situation and feeling your response, you act in accordance with whatever patterns you accept as you, and therefore send a message to your inner child with a screenshot of the time and a picture of the pattern attached that says, "This is who I am right now." As in, right in this exact moment. As in, universe has infinite precision, it all the way in this exact moment. This is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you can show your inner child who you want to be and have them learn to be that person no matter who it is. On the other hand, you're always sending these messages and teaching your inner child who to be no matter who it is. Confidence and self-trust come directly from your ability to be in congruence with your inner child. You need to match them, no matter who it is. There's a reason that people who have fallen ill of the mind or who have been poisoned can be so confident in their limitations and flaws. They've taught their inner children that that's who they are. You see, the inner child is not just someone or something that we have to take care of as we move through our lives. They have a job to do. The inner child is responsible for judging whether or not something is in alignment with you, whether it takes the form of a person, a concept, a feeling, or an event or condition. It's their job to keep the story straight, and it's your job as the witness to be their eyes and ears and nose and tongue and skin and aura. so that they can get the story, so that they can have anything to work with in the first place. Now, it's important to remember that you cannot see properly if something is stuck in your eye. Simply trying to tell your inner child who you are now will always be ineffective because they only receive information from you through your function as their senses. So you need to keep yourself pointed at the behaviors you want in order to convince your inner child of a new pattern. That's why it's important to count your wins and to measure your successes. You need to be aware of the primary way that you communicate with your inner child so that you know how to point them at consistencies or inconsistencies to convince them to update the pattern of who you are. They don't want to tear down the Legos, so to speak. And even if you have a better idea that they'll love more, it'll still be reluctant because it still hurts to break down what you've built. But that's not the only reason for them to be reluctant to destroy and rebuild. One of the biggest obstacles for your inner child is the fear of new things being worse than old things. There are few things that even come close to the feeling of sacrificing your building with new hope and getting a worse outcome than when you started. But sometimes even that pain can lead to the greatest outcome. So how can we navigate this? That's where you, the witness, have to direct your attention to the inner parent and hold a perimeter for them to safely soothe your inner child and teach them the understanding and perspective through threat assessment. Now, threat assessment is the primary process behind soothing fear as far as I'm aware. It's not like completely solo. There's there's more kind of like specific details and stuff that you can get into, but none of that happens without threat assessment, and ideally it happens as a direct result of the threat assessment. So that's what I mean by that. It's not like a completely solo thing. It's easy to screw it up, quite frankly. It's easy to assess threats without the necessary depth. It's easy to just assess the external threats. But your inner child is usually afraid of the threat to what they've built. So the inner parent has to focus on teaching the inner child how to see the fullness of the internal threat. And they have to focus on teaching them or helping them see their own strength and the strength that the strength of their creation, how it compares to their situation. Kind of screwed that up. I'm going to say that again. The inner parent has to focus on teaching the inner child how to see the fullness of their internal threats. And the inner parent has to help the inner child see how the strength of their creation compares to the situation. Your inner child just wants to feel like they're going to be okay. And your inner parent can assure them of that, even if they take damage, even if they take a lot of damage. Once your inner child knows that they can handle the situation, it'll be a lot easier to move around and move through it, even if they don't know how they're going to be okay in the physical world. I've found that this deep or layered fear is pretty much always the biggest blocker of progress, because it also blocks people from seeing other things that are blocking them. Now, once your inner child has experience or training with assessing internal threats and familiarity with their own strength, they'll be able to develop a much more balanced view of the situation, which is important because in the process of action, perception comes before feeling, which comes before thought, which comes before action. You perceive a situation and develop a baseline understanding of what's going on based on your observation skills. There are many things that you can perceive at any given time, including implications, which is why implications can affect the way you feel before you even realize that you've perceived them. After perception comes the initial reaction, which generally takes the form of a cocktail of emotions in various different amounts. These emotions have to make it through a tight channel and last for a while before they can make it all the way to the mind as thoughts that can be translated. This part can get to be quite energy intensive. Some feelings get to this stage and run through the thought section as like a lightning round, calculating a bunch of information and jumping out the body as action, including speech, as soon as is absolutely possible. But most emotions land in your head as thoughts, which can tune your decisions with precision. That is, assuming that nothing went wrong in that process to ruin your precision. If your ability to perceive is weak, you'll build a bad foundation for your understanding of the situation from the ground up. If your ability to feel is weak, then you'll overcharge the emotions when by the time they make it to the mind, they'll discharge immediately, resulting in decisions that you don't even realize you're making. And if your ability to think is weak, you won't be able to integrate the information you're getting into an accurate picture, which usually results in near but definite misses. Any combination of these abilities can be strong or weak at any given time, and they do combine to form higher highs and lower lows. The witness is responsible for perceiving, the inner child is responsible for feeling, and the inner parent is responsible for thinking. Growth occurs whenever the three of them are all doing their jobs and working as a team well, which is your default state of being. And that growth manifests in your actions and is measurable. Quick aside, I want to note that even though the inner child and the inner parent are a part of you, like you didn't necessarily choose them, or we don't know if you chose them. And it's important for folks to understand that out of the entity hearing this, so not the body hearing this, not the mind hearing if you dig all the way deep, the entity that is listening to me, the entity that listens to your thoughts, the entity that sees your thoughts, the entity that feels your feelings, that's not exactly the inner child. It's not exactly the inner parent. It's different. It's the observer. It's the witness. You are the witness, right? And it's important for us to keep in mind that you are the witness, and that you find success when you center yourself in being the witness of yourself, of your natural self. There is a natural and authentic version of you that you are here to witness. You understand what I'm saying? Who decides what sounds good to your inner child? Not you. You see what I'm saying? You can disagree with your inner child all you want, but that's not actually going to change what they value. Do you see what I'm saying? They have their own systems and they're separate from your control. What you control is what you're observing. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, habits are informational and action-based patterns in your choices. And even though they influence your idea of who you are, none of them singularly tell the full story. Habits are a part of a much bigger picture when it comes to who you truly are. And as the attention manager, you have the power to highlight the full picture with habits included. It can be extremely easy to get caught up in worrying about how much your habits say about you. But ultimately, you can always point at the full set of information regarding why you're doing the things that you're doing, better than anybody else can. Once you give yourself enough truthful data, it'll get easier and easier to see yourself as more than just your habits, whether they're good or bad. You have the ability to change the way that you perceive things. Keep in mind what I just said. You have the ability to control what you observe. You have the ability to change the way you perceive things, and you can observe the mechanisms following your adjustment. The cost of this ability is accountability for the consequences of your attention management. If you only pay attention to how you do things wrong and how your system will never be able to work up the positive momentum to take an important risk. And that's on you. If you stare too long at your victories and someone gets hurt because you stopped accounting for your weaknesses, that's also on you. Knowing that perception is your domain does help us, though. It allows us to explain the difference between the most common source of stifled or even negative growth and its healthier counterpart, shame and guilt. Put simply, the difference between shame and guilt lies in your understanding of the reason for the weakness. A shameful person will look at a habit that they disapprove of and see a personal flaw that lies beyond the reach of their consciousness. You'll hear a lot of things that ultimately point at some foundational flaw, real or otherwise, and act like there's nothing to be done about it. Shame is guilt without blame. Heavy guilt without the honesty to recognize the actual choice that led to the bad outcome. Guilt is more reflective. It comes when you know what you've done, and it prompts you to reflect on that, which brings remorse. Guilt says, I screwed that up, while shame says, of course I screwed that up. Shame does not recognize the control that you had in the situation because a shameful person is too busy feeling like a victim to see how they're the perpetrator. Guilt recognizes that because someone got hurt due to your actions, you need to take a turn in the back seat and reassess, reobserve. The final form of shame is perfectionism, in which the inevitability of failure is used as a consistent excuse to not try to succeed at making a better situation. It says, well, I can't be perfect, so I'll just stay broken. The psychological term that corresponds to this concept is known as an internal or external locus of control and applies more generally across the emotional spectrum, but those applications are also slightly beyond the scope of this video. So as far as changing habits goes, typically you'll be motivated by some form of discontentment with your current habitual situation, so you'll have to fend off shame primarily to keep your internal locus of control intact. Ultimately, that's true for me. Results may vary a little bit on that one. Ultimately, things happen in this universe from the inside out. Everything we've discussed today flows from the more internal to the more external in terms of its mechanics in a given situation. If you were to ask me to boil down the habits changing process, to something that I could tell the average person who doesn't feel like watching a long video or reading, I would say, understand the way that you make decisions, the process that you have for making decisions. Understand how that happens. Understand why that happens. Understand the all of the nitty-gritty and the details of your own self, and distill the core driving principles of your decision-making process. Then, as you move through your life, simply choose different options. Be aware of the risk factors that you're working with. Work around them. Once you understand yourself, once you know yourself, you'll be able to move freely throughout these choice situations, and you will be able to tailor your experience and your reality much more effectively. So long video, really just to say, know thyself and prosper. But it's important for our people to know, like, what the fuck are we even talking about when we say know thyself? What are we even talking about when we say self-awareness? What is all this stuff? But yeah, I hope that's helpful. Happy habit hunting. I do believe that this is something that you can probably spread. Like, if you know people who are willing to listen to a 30-minute video, send this to them. Send this to them even if you think they're pretty solid at changing their habits. Like, at the end of the day, you can pull useful information out of anything. And you can always pull information out of truthful things. So, assuming I'm telling the truth, new people will be able to gain something from this experience. So if you know anybody who could benefit from this, send it to them, because our society is not giving us these tools. Our society is not giving us these tools. We need to like make it happen for each other if we happen to have the tools, and I happen to have some of these tools. So, like I said, happy habit hunting. I hope this is helpful. Take care out there.